wide open and clear, that's what zero feels like. It doesn't feel like a dullness. It doesn't feel like a depletion. It doesn't feel like a depression. Those are misunderstandings of zero, and that's why I wrote the book. So people can go, oh, I see. I don't have to collapse. I could be not motivated and stay wide open and loving and full and creative.
In this episode of Insights at the Edge, my guest is David Deida. David is an unusual and original wisdom teacher, provocative and insightful. He teaches at the intersection and edge of our spiritual unfolding and sexuality. He's the best-selling author of 11 books that have been published in more than 35 languages. For more than 15 years, David has been named to the Watkins Spiritual 100 list. That's a list that recognizes the world's most spiritually influential figures. He's the author of the international classic for men, The Way of the Superior Man, Dear Lover for women, a book for couples called The Enlightened Sex Manual, and now a new book. It's called The Man of Zero. That's what we'll be talking about in this episode of Insights at the Edge. David, welcome.
Thank you very much, Tami. It's always great to talk with you.
The Man of Zero. Go ahead, introduce me, if you will. Pretend, ready for this? 1, 2, 3 different men walked into the room and you were like, oh my goodness, these are men of zero. What would they be like?
I'm not quite sure you'd be able to tell when they just walked into the room. In general, a man of zero is a man who has come to a point in his life where he no longer has the meaning that he used to. He no longer has the sense of purpose that he used to. So at one point, he might have been highly focused, purposed, motivated, with a lot of meaning in his life. And then suddenly, often for no external reason, it becomes empty for him. He just simply isn't motivated. And, he could be in a loving relationship with a great profession and, children who love him. So he could be in an externally ideal situation. But the man of zero has come to zero motivation and meaning. And in the past, I've helped men rediscover their new meaning. How do you find your next deepest meaning? And I cover that extensively in The Way of the Superior Man, my previous book. But in this book, The Man of Zero, I look at, okay, what happens if you don't do anything? What happens if you just stay absolutely present, relaxed, effortlessly here, and allow what is to be, what emerges from that when you no longer have a sense of purpose. So it's how do you live your life from power, a kind of primal power that is moving everything, but isn't your personal purpose anymore because you've outgrown that. So that's what the Man of Zero is.
The Way of the Superior Man, as I mentioned in the introduction, is the classic book that you wrote that came out in 1997, almost 30 years ago. I'm curious, David, the evolution in your work to the Man of Zero, how that lived in you, if you will. You don't write about that in the book, but in a way you're teaching, obviously, from your own knowing and experience. How is it fair to say that you moved from living as David Deida, the Way of the Superior Man, to a man of zero? What was that like for you personally?
Yeah, it is true to say that. For me, the Way of the Superior Man was a way of living at my edge. It was a way of stretching myself and feeling how I can serve others, how I could give others the gift so that their lives are better, and how do I challenge myself so I'm always growing one step at a time from where I'm at. But after you do that for a while, and it doesn't mean age, some men are very young men and maybe they take psychedelics or something and they have a vision, and in this vision they realize that everything they're experiencing is an appearance, a kind of light in consciousness. And when they do that, they may no longer have the sense of purpose they used to have. They used to feel money was important, or they used to feel success was important. And now that has just evaporated. They no longer feel that. So the man of zero has come to a point where they're no longer motivated by the same motivations they were in the past. Now, what's dangerous here is you could become depressed. So a man can collapse when he's feeling unmotivated. But if you don't collapse, if you can stay very present with the moment, with what is, without collapsing, even though you have no sense of purpose or meaning, something else happens. You begin to live and think and move from a deeper place that's not personal anymore. And that is what happened to me. I found that although I loved what I was doing, just the motive to do anything began to dissolve. And just being, just literally being, sitting, walking, began to overtake my life. And so I began to jot some notes down about it in case it's helpful to others.
You write towards the beginning of the book, don't mistake zero for emotional neutrality. What's it like as a man of zero with intense emotional experience?
So many men conflate what I call zero with like no thoughts, the stopping of thoughts, the stopping of emotions, a kind of blankness. And that's not zero at all. Zero is no resistance. So when you no longer resist what is, and when you're no longer trying to add something to what is, and you're no longer trying to subtract from what is, that's zero. Now, it may be that emotions are moving very strongly in any moment. And in that moment, emotions may be very powerful, and yet you're at zero because you're not pushing them away. You're not grasping onto them. You're just being with them, present with them. That's the zero I'm talking about. So you can be very emotional, very thoughtful. You can be incredibly creative. In fact, the thoughts that arise from that place of deep being, that deep awareness, are creative thoughts. They're no longer the kind of trauma thoughts or loops of thoughts that we have from hurts in our childhood, but our thoughts begin to emerge from the source of the moment. So they're very fresh and creative rather than in reaction to something from our past, like our childhood.
Now, you mentioned, David, that in your own experience, the sense of meaninglessness, if you don't collapse into it, something else comes up, something else happens. And I'm wondering, for people who are listening who say, well, I'm not collapsing, but I feel this ongoing sense of meaninglessness, of emptiness, and it doesn't feel, the subtitle of your book talks about a guide to primal power. I don't necessarily feel a sense of primal power. I feel a sense of unknown nothingness. Doesn't feel filled with presence and power. Do I just need to sit here longer in this space?
Possibly. There's many details in the book that would help orient you to ways of being. Um, so let's just take a thought, any thought. If a thought is arising, something is happening. There's a happening, a thought is happening. And what is moving that thought? I mean, when you look at it, you didn't plan on the thought and then sound out the thought and then think to yourself as if you had never thought it, and then listen to your own thought that you thought out back to yourself. It's not like that. It just appears. Thoughts just happen. And that happening has a power to it, an energy. It's the same powered energy that's all happening is, the planets circulating the sun, or the, universe is spinning. There's a power. Something is happening. Something is going on. Happening is happening. Life is being lived. And when you are no longer adding or subtracting from that as a man of zero, you are lived by that power. You never understand it. You never know where you're going. You never know what's next. You don't know the details of who you are or what anything is, but you remain totally clear, present, open to the moment, uncontracted, able to respond to the moment, and able to feel the depth that is beneath every moment, whether you're talking now, like the two of us are talking, or whether we're in a dream, stuff is still happening in the dream. So at all moments, we can access the power of isness, if we will, the power of what is happening.
As you mentioned, David, there's a lot of detail and nuance in the book, The Man of Zero. There are three main sections of the book. The first, where you talk about what it means to be a man of zero, and then sex at zero, and we're going to get into that, and then living artfully and applying and practicing, if you will, living as the man of zero in many different situations, working with money, lots of life challenges. One of the things you and I have talked about over the years, because Sounds True published The Way of the Superior Man in paperback after you had published it in hardcover on your own as this underground classic. And one of the things we've talked about over the years is how many women purchased The Way of the Superior Man, purchased to understand the men in their lives, to give to the men in their lives. And I'm wondering if you think that will be true also with this new book, The Man of Zero, and why women might be drawn to reading the book.
Yeah, to my surprise, in the past, for instance, with The Way of the Superior Man, I believe more women purchase that than men. They apparently find that it helps understand men and communicate with men, understand men's motivations and desires. And yes, I'm equally surprised to find out that The Man of Zero seems to appeal to the partners of Men in Zero at least as much as Men of Zero. So there are many women who feel, why doesn't he express his feelings? You know, why does my partner not express his feelings? Why does he not seem that interested in life? Why does he not like to talk so much with me? Why does he seem irritated with me when I just want to connect? And the answer to all of those questions is that zero or emptiness or nothingness is the essence of what I call the masculine, which is pure awareness. And so by being that emptiness, by being that nothingness, the masculine male, the man in each relationship who's identified with the masculine, a man could be identified with the feminine too, but masculine identified men will feel empty and free when a woman is talking to them and she's filled with love and joy and happiness. He may feel it as a pain in the butt because it requires his attention. And so many men feel the more masculine identified they are, the more they're identified with zero, the more they'll feel like everything about their feminine partner, her spontaneity, her all the things he loves about her too, can become irritating because he wants nothing. He wants nothingness. He wants to peace and quiet at a certain level. And so that understanding is very valuable to a lot of women. And by understanding that, then they can understand how to be with that kind of man. A big part of the book is about how couples can be together when one of them is a man of zero.
You write in the section on sex at zero that the man of zero knows how to riverbank her flow. And I thought, wow, I've never heard that as a verb before, riverbank and riverbanking someone. And I liked the image a lot. Can you explain that?
Sure. A river is composed of both the water, which is flowing, and the banks of the river, the shape of the river, which gives the river direction. So metaphorically, we could say that the power of the river, the strength of the river is in the water, that is the feminine. So the feminine is the power, the energy of the river, the flow of the river. And the masculine of the river is the non-changing banks that just give it shape. And so often, if a human being is in a very feminine identified moment and they're having trouble making a decision because they're flowing in many directions at once, it's helpful for their masculine partner to provide river banking, to provide an option. Not that they would listen necessarily to that option or obey or anything like that, but just to have a concrete option, to be with somebody who is decisive, flexibly decisive, but that decisiveness allows her to feel her flow, the power of her flow. And so what river banking is the loving and gentle giving of the banks to the flow of the river. So it's not just flowing randomly and all over the place, but it's flowing in a direction. So together, the water and the banks make a fullness of flow. The masculine and the feminine together make a fullness of flow. So I call it river banking.
Now, here in a moment, just to have some personal disclosure so I can bring my full authenticity to the conversation. In the beginning of The Man of Zero, very beginning, you write, well, who's this book for? It's primarily for heterosexual men and the women who love them. And yet here I am, a queer woman who has masculine and feminine energies running through me and through my sexuality, along with my partner, who also has a lot of masculine and feminine energy running through her life. And I brought that beingness to reading The Man of Zero. And David, I have to say, got so much from the book, taking on the masculine energy and advice and the feminine energy and advice. And I imagine many readers may come actually with that kind of inner fluidity and flexibility, if you will, to the reading of your work. And I wonder what your thoughts are about that.
Yeah, I hope they do come with that inner flexibility to the reading of this work. I write in a kind of black and white way, mostly, as I say in the intro, because it's easier for me. Instead of going through all the possible pronouns and all the possible gender identifications and all the possible sexual orientations, I just use the simple one, masculine and feminine, or plus and minus, or he and she, or north and south poles, the most simple form of polarity. I find that people are intelligent enough to apply it to their very unique situation as well as their unique sexuality. So that I write it in a way that's very black and white, but I hope it's read in a way where people can apply it to their unique situation. If we were in a live workshop, I would be unpacking the principles into the specifics for each individual's question. So I would strongly encourage people to modify the principles to meet their situation, whatever it is.
So in this middle section of the book, Sex at Zero, the section I thought, God, I wonder, am I going to be able to relate to this? And I got so much out of it. One of the things you write about is how she, this feminine energy, has a genius for testing your zero. And you give lots of examples of this, of, when she's criticizing you, when she is in conflict with whatever it is you're doing or saying. And I wonder if you can talk more about this, the testing of your zero, and maybe come up with an example that is classic for you and how this manifests.
Sure. The kind of peace and quiet is the essence of the masculine desire. So to think of a monk or a yogi in a cave or a guy in an office, or just to be alone doing their thing, guides a lot of the masculine uh, towards where it needs to go. And so, I'm not sure how to apply this for your specific what kind of example you would like, but anytime the feminine partner or a feminine identified partner in the moment is bringing something, stuff, energy to the moment, it will feel like a test to the more masculine partner in that moment, because the more masculine partner has a choice now. Do I just rest in nothingness, or do I listen to the content? Do I follow what she's saying? Um, and if I drift a little bit and she gets angry at me because I'm not listening or I'm not paying attention, that also feels like a test. It feels like, can I attend to her without drifting? And the what the feminine finds most sexy in their partner when that person's in a feminine moment is the masculine, the direction, confidence, clarity, not like a noodle, not like confusion, but conciseness, clarity, depth, integrity. And so I'll say she is the universal feminine, is constantly testing the masculine inadvertently. It's not like a thought, I am going to test the masculine now. It's more of a feeling, can I trust this person? Can I trust this person's presence, or will they collapse? When I say this or when I challenge this, do they stay relaxed in their body, or do they clench up and pull away? And so the feminine is always feeling, can I trust this person? Can I trust their depth? Can I trust their integrity? And that kind of testing could be very frustrating to a lot of masculine people, because to them, they would rather not deal with the testing. But, the reason there's such a big part of the book about that is it's so prevalent, so common, and it's the result of so much conflict in relationship, where the masculine partner thinks the feminine partner is causing trouble, making an issue where there is none. Why are you arguing? We talked about this yesterday. I thought we had solved this. The masculine partner is trying to bring the conversation to an end, to a resolution, whereas the feminine partner, if they're in their feminine, is just enjoying the exchange, enjoying the flow of love, tone of voice. There's just a delightfulness to talking, whereas for the masculine, the delightfulness is in silence.
It's interesting that we're talking here about having our zero tested, because in the first segment of the book, where you're describing who is the man of zero, you talk about how the man of zero relates to inherited patterns, of being triggered by this, that, or the other thing. So how does the man of zero work with their inherited patterns of contraction when they come up?
Yeah, well, this is a huge one. There's a lot of patterns from our past. We inherit patterns from our past, from our childhood past, also from the way our parents treated us, but also from our parents' childhood and our grandparents' childhood. We inherit tendencies from ancestors that are running through us, all of us. And so as these patterns, not only human ancestors, but animal ancestors, mammalian patterns, mammals. So the kind of violence, sexual, I guess you could just say sexual violence to kind of summarize that whole domain, which you see in a number of animals, you also see in humans. And what a man of zero, how he approaches that is these patterns from his past. He didn't create the patterns, he inherited them. They're coming up. So he might be noticing thoughts. They could be violent thoughts, for instance. And a man of zero just witnesses those thoughts. He lets those thoughts move through him. He doesn't contract around them. He doesn't push them away. He doesn't enact them. He allows them to come up in his awareness and dissipate. And through those means, his past, his personal past, his family's past, his ancestors' past, his mammalian past becomes purified over time by being released or let go of in the light of awareness. And so slowly his life becomes purified of these past tendencies. Otherwise, he'll just act them out over and over and over. But he doesn't think there's anything wrong. A big difference is a man of zero doesn't feel shame or guilt for these thoughts running through them. He understands that they're inherited.
One of the interesting lines I pulled out from the book because it really got my attention. A man of zero doesn't feel bad about being in a bad mood. I thought that's interesting. I often feel bad when I'm in a bad mood. I feel bad about feeling like I'm in a bad mood. Like
Mhm, mhm.
I'm clearly not bringing joy into this room. I'm in a bad mood. And yet, of course, it happens. And I think your point is to feel it, be aware of it, and let it change, let it pass. Is that correct?
Yeah, there are very specific techniques you could use. If you have trauma in the body, you could use some somatic releasing techniques. If you have trauma inherited through family constellations, you could do family work. So there, I mean, there's specific forms of psychotherapeutic and somatic work that help loosen these things. Um, but this is a reason, and I'm not sure we want to open this right now, but a lot of people who are relatively spiritually evolved, and by that I mean they're pretty loving people, they could be open, they're connected to a deep source. A lot of those people have these inheritances. So maybe they inherited alcoholism. To some people, alcoholism is a genetic inheritance, not all, but sometimes. And so for that kind of person, even if they relax to zero, even if they're in the present moment fully with no resistance, those addictions will arise. Their body will move through addictive processes, even though they're being loving. And that doesn't mean they're not loving. It means their body has inherited addictions. Their body may inherit aggressions. Their body and mind may inherit all kinds of traits that we don't consider, I don't know what, enlightened. And yet they occur. And it's not that they're the exception, they're the rule. I mean, anybody who's been in spiritual practice domains enough, they know that a lot of these people, they have some twists to them. And that's what they are. They're past twists, sometimes from their family inherited, sometimes from their species inherited. And so it's really important to understand that just because somebody can be very present and loving, it doesn't mean that these twists no longer arise, their contractions no longer arise. They do still arise. So you might still have to protect yourself against them, for instance. But that doesn't mean that you also wouldn't avail yourself to the openness of this person. So somebody could be very open and yet have past inheritance come and infiltrate their relationships.
You're making these important, I think, discriminations. And one of the chapters, you write the book, The Man of Zero, as a series of almost 100, I think, short chapters, 2, 3 pages long. They're short, they're pithy, they make their point. And one of them towards the end of the book is on the value of discrimination itself as a type of, you compare it really to a type of earning power for the man of zero. I wonder if you could say more about that.
Yeah, well, there's two types of value that we're working on in this book. One is the value of depth. So just being sourced deeply creates value. People want to be around you. It feels good. And so they it's valuable to them. But another type of value is discrimination. It's making distinctions. So, if you wanted to be valuable as a wine connoisseur, you would want to make a bunch of distinctions. Like I am not a wine connoisseur, so like I could tell red and white, but someone who's a wine connoisseur could tell a certain amount of tannins and a certain amount of, aromatic flavors of this kind. And then there's the aftertaste and the before taste. Like they have this much more distinctions that they make. Or a lover, somebody who's a lousy lover, they're just like plop, stroke, plop, done, thank you. Somebody who's an exquisite lover can tell the difference between moving their hand a quarter inch to the left on their partner or to the right or in a circle, or should they move while they exhale or when they inhale. They're making many, many distinctions that increases their value. But in any domain, it could be sexual, it could be wine, it could be nuclear physics. But the more distinctions that you could make, the more valuable you become to others.
I'd never really thought of that before, David. I found that very illuminating. So thank you for pointing that out. I notice in our conversation that I'm tempted to ask you a lot of personal questions. And I know you're really private. You're a very private person. So I'm a little bit like, Tami, really? Do you have to do this? So you can just tell me to back off if you want. And I know you would. But when it comes to, for example, a man of zero being tested, tested by the feminine, tested by life, I'm curious what tests you.
Well, anytime things don't go the way I want them to,
Oh
I'm I'm
my.
I'm tested. I mean, I'm tested like anybody else is tested. It's just when things aren't happening the way you want, when people seem to be interfering, when was it Sartre who said others are hell? So there's just a generalized feeling that when things aren't going the way you want them, you wish they were. Now the difference is, as a man of zero, you don't collapse. You just notice they're not going the way you want them. You don't add anything, you don't subtract anything. You stay fully present, and you let the next moment emerge from that source of creativity. It's like an artist, a painter, or a musician, a really good artist or musician. After they've practiced for many years and have the technique down, they learn to let go and let this kind of deeper intelligence, musical intelligence or painting colors, come forth. So they can't really predict. They're in a state of, I don't know. I don't know what I'm going to paint next. Exactly. I don't know the tone, the note I'm going to make next, but I'm going to feel it. I'm going to come from the deepest place I can and let my life be lived from that place. So that's how you begin to make decisions, even when things aren't going the way you might want them to go.
And in terms of inherited patterns of contraction, if you're willing, I'm wondering what might have been one of the inherited patterns you've had to work through and the purification process for you in that regard.
Well, people tend to manifest patterns in different realms. So, for instance, some people tend to always be in financial trouble. They manifest their contractions financially. Other people tend to be emotional wrecks. They're always going through an emotional issue. So, we could say their emotional body or their emotional domain, they have most of theirs. I seem to tend to collect mine in the physical domain. So I noticed that I physically manifest my contractions. My mind can be fairly clear, my emotions can be fairly calm, but my body will tend to manifest contractions that are not I'm not aware of. So everybody has their own domain that they need to become, that they find their contractions in.
Now, you mentioned that the man of zero approaches this question of value, yes, in terms of this capacity to make discriminations, but in terms of the depth of our presence. And I thought one section of the book that I was just like, that's such a great point that you're pointing out. It had to do with the masculine providing stability through financial power. And you said, well, what if the woman actually has more money than the man? And this is what you wrote: the stability that you can provide, that is an even deeper form of masculine stability, even deeper than money, is your undistracted attention and unwavering attention. And what I'd like to hear more about is how the man of zero brings undistracted attention, unwavering attention to a woman who's coming at him let's say with upset or criticism or something like that? How do I bring undistracted attention, unwavering attention when I don't want to?
Well, the main thing is to understand that not wanting to. So the masculine inherently loves emptiness, silence, less argument, not more argument. So when your partner, let's say your more feminine partner, is coming toward you with stuff, with energy, with words, there's going to be a kind of flinch in a masculine person. They may love each other very much. This has nothing to do with love, but there's a kind of flinch like, ooh, this is going to be a lot to deal with. Um, how am I going to deal with this? So the first thing to do is notice what threatens you. So you need to sink into the nothingness. So find the place in you that's the same awareness before your partner comes to you, while your partner's with you, after your partner leaves you. So there's a beingness that's there now and all the time. By relaxing as that beingness, you stabilize as that presence more over time. So the first step is to learn to stabilize as that presence by repeating it even when your partner is coming to you. Then the next step is to feel, I'll say her, it could be a him, but to feel her energy as energy. So feel her emotions as energy, feel the energy in her body flowing. Um, don't run from the energy, don't freeze the energy, don't hold the energy, just completely be with the energy. And then what I would do is feel under that energy. So she may be upset, she may be happy, but under that energy, whatever emotion she's feeling, there's a kind of universal desire for love or awareness that's in her heart and my heart and your heart and all hearts. And so you connect to the oneness in her heart that is the same as yours, the same aware being in your heart is in her heart. So you connect there and you stay connected there. You feel her energy going up, going down, moving, hot, cold. So you feel her energy as it is. And you stay rested in the depth of being itself, which is the depth of your being and her being. It's the depth of your dog or cat's being. And so there's just a quality of love when you rest being to being with any creature like that. But that testing you've brought up a few times now is really an important point, and it's a big part of the book, because otherwise couples can really get into conflict if they don't understand why that's happening and
Well,
how
it's
to be
pretty
present.
easy, to be zero when nothing's coming at you. It's under stress. It's under stress that it's challenging.
Totally. Well, that's why men would become monks. It's easier. It's by far easier to be a monk than to be married. And it's easier to be married than to be married with children. Like the more complexity you have on your plate, the farther you're stretched from zero, and the more you'll tend to contract in fear and panic and anxiety and so forth. So you're completely right that if nothing's happening, it's pretty darn easy to relax at zero. And that's why the tests come in the form of the feminine being the world, the feminine being your partner, the feminine being everything that changes, all the forces that change that you experience daily.
Now, towards the beginning of Man of Zero, you offered this framework, if you will, and I thought it was very clear and helpful that there's what you call basic man, and then level 2, if you will, superior man, and now level 3, Man of Zero. And maybe before we go on, because I have a little surprise question for you here, David, but so everybody's tracking with us, describe basic man, superior man, and Man of Zero in terms of having a sense of purpose in life.
Yes. So they're not really stages, they're more like phases. So when one is being a basic man, that means you have very specific needs that are not being fulfilled and you need them fulfilled. So you need food. is a basic need. You need a certain amount of money. You need shelter. You need a certain amount of friendship in your life. So establishing these basic needs is what I mean by a basic man. And it's not a criticism. Everyone needs to do that. So we all need to exercise the basic part of us. A superior man is once you have enough, so you have a career that's working, or you've established some form of earning an income, let's say, then you begin to look at how can I earn better? Like, how can I give my gift to the world? How can I make the world a better place? It's not just wanting more, like in the basic man. It's wanting better. You become a master. You don't want to just golf. You want to become really good at golfing. You don't want to just have sex. You want to become really good at having sex. So you learn to become a master of these different areas, and you learn to serve others. You learn that ultimately what kind of makes you happiest or fulfills your sense of purpose the most is serving others. Now, most people, if they do that for some period of time, they come to a period where that's no longer fulfilling. They're serving others, they're achieving mastery, and it's just like, okay, it's still empty. And at that point can begin the way of zero. And the man of zero is a man who, as I've said, he adds nothing to the moment. He subtracts nothing from the moment. He is with the moment fully present. He's allowing the past contractions from his life and past, his family's life and mammal's life to come up and release themselves and purify themselves over time. So those are the basic is just getting your basic needs met. Superior man is becoming an artist of life. And the man of zero is when being itself is sufficient, simply being. So you could just sit there for days, or something could happen. You could get up and do something very intensely for days. You could sit there and do nothing, then suddenly you want to create a business. You get up, you make phone calls, you write a plan, or however you're doing it, and you make a business. Then at some point that dissolves. You sit and you do nothing again. So these phases can come and go. You can be in a man of zero phase for a while. And for instance, I've been in the man of zero phase for a while. And then this book kind of rose up to be written. I didn't plan on it. It just started happening, but I didn't resist it either. So when the book started writing itself, I just cooperated with it. And so these are phases, and you go from one phase to another, and you could circle back to earlier phases too, of course.
And this is what you mean in the subtitle of the book by freedom beyond ambition, that this book didn't come from a quote unquote ambitious place in you.
Yeah, and a man of zero no longer lives from a place of ambition. So up until that point that he understands zero, ambition is what moves him. He feels he can't do anything unless he has ambition. His life doesn't mean anything unless he has ambition. He has nowhere to go unless he has ambition. Once you've stabilized post ambition, then life lives through you. Life is beating your heart, breathing your breath, moving your body, speaking your words. Life is living through you. So ambition doesn't need to be the cause of things. So your freedom is beyond ambition.
Okay, the surprise question. Do you think there's some similar phase unfolding for women that you would describe differently? Basic, superior, and woman of zero. Is there some way you would describe that in using different language?
Well, yes, certainly. And there's different ways of doing that. But yeah, this book was just for a very specific slice of the population that I wanted to focus on. As a more feminine identified person grows, then rather than looking for love outside of her, she begins to be lived by love. So even though she still wants to share love, she doesn't need to get it from someone else. She's being lived by it. So I wouldn't call it a woman of zero. Maybe it would be a woman of infinity or a woman of power or something. But she would be overflowing with fullness. When a woman has a baby or a child or a new project, even her love is overflowing. Her love is just overflowing. It's all she could do. Talk about. There's a sparkle to her eyes. Her body is motivated. There's a literal light about her, like she's brightened. Her being is radiant. That love is the basis for, if you want to use these words, a woman of infinity, just like that presence is the basis for the man of zero. Ultimately, they're the same thing. Being divides into awareness and fullness, or presence and radiance. But that the being itself is obviously prior to sexual differentiation.
Okay, and just to once again, I like this 3-stage or 3-phase model. I like it. I don't know. There's something about it structurally. So if at first this female says, I need love out there. Where's my soulmate? I'm desperate. Okay, I'm exaggerating to make a point of basic. And then we talked about the woman of infinite, overflowing, full love expression. What would you say? What's the superior step in the middle? What does that look like?
Well, that's a good question. And there are a few chapters specifically about this in The Man of Zero. So, when we're talking about the feminine, we're talking about fullness or scarcity. The spectrum is fullness or scarcity. So when she's feeling a lot of scarcity, a lack of abundance, then she'll be in a basic mode. She'll be needy. She'll be grasping for something she thinks she doesn't have. And like you said, if you want to skip to the abundant woman who's overflowing with love, she just overflows continuously and transforms wherever she goes into a kind of place of love. In between those two extremes is a kind of middle range of things like that are full, but not exceptionally full. So for instance, having a delicious meal is very enjoyable to the feminine, because you feel a little empty, a little hungry. I'm not talking about starving to death. I just mean it's time for dinner. And now you're eating. So there's a little bit of fullness. It's very pleasurable. Conversation. The Man of Zero, conversation with them is like sitting there in silence. A bunch of guys can go off fishing and just sit there and have a great day. For the feminine, conversation is a form of exchanging that fullness. So in the middle ranges of the feminine is going out to eat, having conversations with friends, going out in nature, just anything that feels like life, feels full, feels, hanging out with your friends. So the middle range of fullness are things like delicious meals and good conversation with friends, or all of them together, some good wine, good conversation with friends, meal, maybe some music. So that would be the middle range of the feminine. If that's what you're asking, I'm not sure I understood you. That would be the superior woman phase, if you will.
Oh, that is an answer. And then I want to get to this aspect of the subtitle. So the book, your new book, The Man of Zero, A Guide to Primal Power, which I feel we've touched on, Boundless Sex, and the Freedom Beyond Ambition. What do you mean by boundless sex? Because here we have the Man of Zero meeting the woman of infinite love,
Right.
overflow. Is that boundless sex, the way the two of them come together?
Well, certainly that would be one form. The way I was using it more in the book is you can be sexual with somebody. So what happens a lot at the zero phase is that a man might feel, I'm not attracted to her sexually anymore. His subjective feeling is, I'm not attracted to my partner sexually anymore. But really what he means is he's not attracted in the way he used to be attracted. The way he used to be was, whatever, lingerie, shape of body, maybe a fetish or something like that. Um, but that's not the fullest form of love. That's highly bounded love. What boundless love is, unbounded love, love without bounds, is to be able to, for instance, lay next to your partner in bed and not necessarily have genital intercourse or, skin flesh sex, but to lay with each other in so much love. I guess maybe you could call it tantric cuddling or something. But you would lay with your partner with so much love that you would both feel no bounds. Your bounds would relax, your boundaries would relax, and you would be in this oneness, like a cocoon of oneness together. That's as good as any sex can feel. So I meant literal boundary free or boundless love, where the boundaries around your sense of self open and you and your partner are in a kind of communion without limits, without separation, boundless.
David, it seems like the journey to zero requires this going into the loss, if you will, of the superior ways of being in order for something deeper to come into expression, into feeling. And it reminds me of this notion of what it means to enter deficient emptiness. And what I mean by that is a sense of emptiness as lack, and how that can turn into the fullness of presence, from deficient emptiness to full emptiness. And I wonder if you can share how you understand that.
Well, as soon as you notice that you're feeling empty, you're noticing. That's an that's a powerful act. So there's no deficiency in noticing. So you might be comparing your sense of fullness and going, I felt more full in the past. I feel less full now. But that noticing that you're less full, that you're more full, that noticing itself is the nature of your being. It's the nature of your awareness. There's no deficiency in that. It's a totally sufficient, totally complete. In fact, you know that you're in it, so to speak, when you don't feel moved to do anything. You feel completely sufficient. The isness of being is so kind of intensely present and yet effortless at the same time. It's a very distinct sense of what that is. I'm not sure if I'm getting to what you're asking.
You are getting to what I'm asking. I think another way I'd like to ask you to point to this is, you talked about how our sense of, here's my agenda in the world, I'm going to help in all these ways, that can become a kind of who cares at a certain point. Like, I'm done. I've done that. Check. I don't have energy. It's not animated anymore. And now you're talking about how it's possible to view our beloved partner and go, oh my God, I used to be so turned on by you, and now I feel a little neutral. And that could also be a doorway, if you will, a portal. So I'm wondering how when we bump up, what other examples might be of bumping up to something that used to be all filled with shiny light for us, that seems empty at a certain point, how we could go through it. And if you have some other examples of that.
Sure. I mean, there's as many examples as people. It could be that somebody works at a profession that they love. I mean, truly love. They wake up in the morning, can't wait to go out into the world and do it. And then suddenly they no longer are moved to do that thing. So it could be professional. It could be with their families. Sometimes people have, let's just say, several children, and they're enjoying raising them. It's a great family. Everyone loves each other. I'm not talking about an abusive household. I just mean a good family. And suddenly the parent might feel, what have I done with my life? I don't want to be a parent. So this could apply to anything, because in fact, everything becomes a doorway to nothingness for the masculine. There's a deep peace and quiet that's beneath everything. And that's the masculine's home. So the masculine over time learns that the dissatisfaction they feel with the woman and world, which is a phrase I use in the book, is natural for them, and that they shouldn't collapse, but instead feel more, even though they're not motivated anymore. And that sense of feeling, of being open, of being alive, of being conscious, sparkling conscious, not dull, not collapsed, but wide open and clear, that's what zero feels like. It doesn't feel like a dullness. It doesn't feel like a depletion. It doesn't feel like a depression. Those are misunderstandings of zero, and that's why I wrote the book. So people could go, oh, I see. I don't have to collapse. I could be not motivated and stay wide open and loving and full and creative. And that's what the Man of Zero is about, how to do.
I've been talking with David Deida. We're talking about his new book, The Man of Zero, a guide to primal power, boundless sex, and the freedom beyond ambition. David, I think like The Way of the Superior Man, this book is going to get a tremendous amount of pass around. It's going to be person to person, person to person, person to person to person to person. I wonder here, another surprise at the end. Would you be willing to read a section of the book that you really like? Just read it out loud to us. One section. I really like this section, Tami.
Yeah, I'd have to find the section and get a book right
Let's
now.
do it.
Okay.
Let's
If you're
do
up
it.
for it, you'd have to hold for a second here. Well, I just opened it randomly to a page. How's that? And
Sounds good.
it gives me the opportunity to say, you mentioned it, that this is written in very short chapters. Some of the chapters are just a few lines each. And the way it's really meant to be read is you pick up the book randomly, you read a page or two, and then you set it down. It's not really the kind of book you read from beginning to end, cover to cover. It's packed, and it's more on taking little pieces and unpacking them for you. So each little piece is very rich, and you can't eat too much. So I would say the reader should be reading each little piece too, just one or two pages at a time. So this very short chapter is called Love is an Agony. So love is an agony. Noticing anything is more heartbreaking than noticing nothing. Even being vulnerable to beauty may hurt. Without resistance, be permeable to suffering. Love is an agony that doesn't contract. That's the section.
It was one of my favorite chapters, as a matter of fact. David Deida, reading from The Man of Zero. David, thank you. Thank you so much for being our guest on Insights.
Thanks. Thank you, Tami. You're a great interviewer as always. Thank you very much.